Hi, welcome to Agsolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are Agsolutely Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode.
Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of Agsolutely Fabulous. It is Jules here today, and I have a special guest host with me, and I have Sarah Secker with me. Sarah, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
So I'm sitting down in Keith in the southeast. We're about 250k south of Adelaide. Very mixed farming area that is lots of irrigation, lots of livestock, lots of everything. Got olives, we've got broadacre, we've got it all. Keith has got about 1,500 people, and Tatiara, the region's got about 7,500 people. So I have fallen into a space of, I suppose, being a regional advocate, as a farm owner, business owner. I really feel very passionately about strong farms existing in strong communities, and having been raised in a small country population myself, I just know that the minute that you lose any strength in your community, the flow on and domino effect that has. So yeah, I just suppose was raised on the values, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And there's a lot that I'm seeing at the moment as a mum, certainly around the early childhood space, it's just not right, and it's not suiting fit for purpose.
Okay, so I've got a question for you, because I did cyber stalk you, because I do this to everybody because I can't help myself. You say you were raised in a small community yourself, but what did you, in between being raised in that small community and ending up at Keith, you did something very interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating about a lot of rural and regional women is that we go, oh, well, you know, I'm on a farm and I'm a farmer's wife. What did you used to do, Sarah? Tell our listeners what you used to do.
So I did spend my 20s as a marketing and advertising executive, mostly in Sydney and London, and then a little bit in Adelaide when I came home. So through that, had some really amazing exposure to a whole plethora of things, and got to work on some big brands, some big campaigns, got to live this fast life. But I think, what's the saying go? You know, once a country girl, always a country girl. I think whilst I'm not back in my own hometown, I think sitting around a bonfire is still who I am.
Yeah. So if you're a regular listener, you'll know this is where Katja and I usually do the chit chat, but I'm really fascinated. I want to know, Sarah, how did you end up going Sydney, London, Adelaide, Keith? How did you end up being back on a farm?
I did my marketing degree in Adelaide, and then at that time, I suppose, just was like, I'm ready to try something else, and packed up my little Mitsubishi Lancer as it was at the time. And I think my family was certainly, what the hell is she doing? Is she setting fire to her life? But at 22, you don't care. So that was cool. And then I suppose I've always been a people person, and just the cool thing about being country is the more I traveled, I really realized is, and even sort of senior contacts I had at the time were just like, oh, you can tell a country girl just rolls her sleeves up. So it's not that I would say special opportunities came to me as a human necessarily, but I think special opportunities do come to a country girl that can just get shit done. At the end of the day, employers just want people that can get shit done and that don't ask for the world. And I got taken to some really, really huge meetings with like Jack Cowan, who's the owner of Hungry Jack's, really early in my career. But the reason I got taken to them is I said, I'll come for free and I'll write the notes and I'll run the coffees. But can I come? And of course, people say yes, unless there's a reason not to. So by having an open mind to those type of experiences and exposures, then in London, I got to work with Ashton Kutcher, got flown over to LA for a week to shoot with Ashton Kutcher. That was the most ritzy-ditzy 5-star thing I've ever done. I was flown business class, stayed in the best hotels, and hung out with Ashton for 2 days. That really, I just made myself indispensable. And that's because a country girl can kind of do anything from, like running errands. I think there's something about country people, and I think you'd probably agree. It's like, and it's certainly something I said on Carl the other day, which is we don't think that we're better than anybody else. And so if it is that you have to go and get somebody some ladies' items from the IGA, you just get on and do it. And certainly there were times where I had to be available. I remember in London one day, I was sent in a black cab over to the BBC offices to deliver gift bags, but it was at like 8 o'clock on a Friday night that it had to be done. Well, I just did it because I was like, I don't know, it looks cool.
Now, a question all our listeners will want to know, did your career have anything in common with Mad Men?
It's everything like Mad Men.
Did you used to get on the piss and then go back and have a little nap on your couch in your office and then wake up with a brilliant idea and then just, make it happen?
It is everything like Mad Men. And let me tell you this, whilst I partied hard and got to go to some of the most amazing parties, and Christmas parties were just something else. So yes, it was completely like Mad Men. And you learn the art of working hard and playing hard and working hard in the morning again. I remember our CEO, when I was in Sydney, used to say, I don't care what you do at night, but you're at work the next morning. If I'm paying for you to get drunk, you are here. So it was like, he just didn't, it's an accepted part of the industry. And I'll be honest with you, like, I would promote my kids go into it. Like, I learned so much. Like, if my kids, whether or not they end up on the farm, but go off and do a couple of business degrees or do a bit of marketing, I mean, I got the exposure I got. Inevitably the skills I'm using in the community now.
And basically with you as a mum, they can go into it like they're forearmed and forewarned. They will know the tricks of the trade and how to perform and how to get the best out of any situation. But you mentioned something very interesting. You said when you were on Carl. So tell me about that. What were you doing talking to our mate, Carl Stefanovic? I don't know if he's our mate because I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen to this podcast. Well, don't worry. When we put it up on socials, we'll be tagging him in it because he does do one thing really well, and that is highlight an issue that needs highlighting. So what were you doing on Carl, Sarah?
Yeah, and I think further just to what you just said, Jill, is I did pop into his DMs one day. I'd been in a series of bad meetings I didn't like down here, and I was feeling a little bit angry. But certainly there are previous episodes. I do listen to his podcast. There are previous episodes where I do think he's a brilliant advocate, or certainly bringing to life rural and remote Australia. And I would echo that from having met him. It certainly came across as a very authentic, genuine lever that he was looking to pull. I think he really is a genuine bloke that just likes the bush, and we talked about that. And so when he knows that there are issues out here, and we've seen him talk about a grand suite of them, he was interested to hear about why I was feeling angry, Jill.
So what makes you angry, Sarah? Because this is for our listeners, because I know, because it makes me angry too. But you've been right at the pointy edge of this issue for a while now. You've been doing some really good advocacy stuff, and we do love to promote and support advocates, especially when it's centered around rural women, their needs, and rural communities and rural families. So what is making you so angry?
I think what makes me angry at the moment is regional communities are like, community is such a special thing. We all know you can't manufacture it, you can't create it. It is the people. And when the minute you drive into a town, no matter where you are, you're like, oh, this is a community that cares. And certainly I live in one of those communities. I live in a community that presents really great economic opportunities. It's a community people are staying in. It's a community that people are moving to. Certainly as a farmer, recruitment, retention, we talk a lot about workforce shortages. So anything I talk about is really generically falls under this banner of livability. This morning I was sitting at my district council's economic development meeting. So I'm really passionate about economic development. Now, the biggest lever that I think is being misunderstood at the moment is access to childcare. And I think the reason it's a lever more so or different in the country is certainly it's not unique to this area that we see housing shortages, farms are getting bigger and the scale that perhaps is reducing the population from generations before us. And as technology increases, again, the overall population is going down. We see a lot of government policy around childcare, but it's always, it feels like it comes straight off the pavements of your big CBDs without even an understanding of what it's like out here. And I think I really must stress again, I don't think we're any better than anyone else, but we're different. There are intricacies, and you could maybe say those same intricacies apply to healthcare, or they apply to, a lot of different things. But where the space of childcare gets really, really tricky, and I think, again, speaking as a farmer and an agricultural person, is we deal with a lot of seasonality.
Yeah.
So whilst a farm and a farmer might feel that seasonality, but often the general economy of the town will also feel that seasonality, because you might be employed at, the tractor shop's probably going to be busier, or the bakery's going to be busier, all these things. So let's just say, by and large, those seasonal flows, ups and downs, do actually follow the general economy. So I think seasonality, the childcare we need is not always 52 weeks a year. And that's a really hard model for government-funded infrastructure to fit around, and I respect that. But in populations where we do see government-funded infrastructure, it's really important that we get economies of scale for a business model to work, and we're all business people. Like, I'm going to assume your audience is going to be somewhat involved in a balance sheet. But that I do get asked, and it definitely has been feedback from Carl Stefanovic, like, why is this government's problem? Well, it's government's problem because childcare is a market. It's driven by profit. So in the cities, that's awesome. They've got their quotas. They need to meet it. I was talking to someone recently, and, those outer suburb areas of your Melbournes and Sydneys, as they grow, it's like 100 houses, you get a childcare, 100 houses, get childcare, whatever that looks like. We're not experiencing that growth. On paper, we don't rate next to that. So it's ensuring that we can create a business case that's of appetite. So the next thing that then happens from that is that if you're a private investor, those lower population areas, it's less viable. It's harder to make money. So then all of a sudden, the government really does become your scalable business option as a provider, if you want to look at them as a source of business. So, I mean, I've got no objection to a Good Start or a Early Who or whatever, any of those private companies coming out here. It's just they don't. So what do we do about that? We can either put our hands up in the air and say, oh, we're just a bit ho-hum and it's not for us, or government just need to start understanding that maybe a leveller between the regions and the city is that they need to be more involved in childcare than maybe they are in the metropolitan areas.
I think that's a really good point, because it also applies for health, because we're told that, like, especially for regional and remote health, that the market will take care of it. That's why they don't need to do anything to raise Medicare rates, because it's a market problem. But when you're in an area with a limited population, there is no market. So therefore there is no service, because the people providing that service can't make a living. And that's a problem. But then you don't get the service. And that's why we don't have the same access to services. And there is a role, I think, for a government to play in levelling out that service provision across all of Australia. And there needs to be flexibility, because, like, childcare subsidies and those sorts of things exist. And at the moment they go directly to the centres providing the care, which, if you don't have a childcare centre, is a bit of a problem, because you don't get access to that. So there needs to be more flexibility in how you can access that support and how you can utilise that for your own circumstances and your own unique circumstances, because I think provision exists, because there is a shortage of good quality childcare places and childcare workers as well. So why not enable, your nan or your sister or your brother to help you in providing that in-home childcare? In-home childcare already exists, but there's so many rules and regulations and those sorts of things around it. I have this conversation with government a lot. Sometimes it's not just about it's not about giving us more money. It's about making the regulations and the framework in which we operate less restrictive and easier for us to access the care and services that we need. But government, they can't think like that. It's really hard for them.
Yeah, and I think absolutely you've hit the nail on the head, because there's probably two lines of work here, where there's a line of work that's the type of investment or funds that could be distributed. But there's also a line of work in just where government does play a role in regulatory. So as an example, some of the ideas we have down here are that at the moment, an au pair isn't eligible for the 88-day ag visa. So an au pair could be added. Now, I can employ a farmhand on that, but not an au pair. What's the difference? There isn't.
Yeah.
So that's immigration. So there's government's role. Or another one that I find bananas is that if you have a HECS debt, which by then default then makes you a skilled worker, but you can't access childcare, your HECS debt is still indexed. So perhaps there's an ability that I don't know what it looks like, but we could pause certain people's or based off geography, because I don't really see how, if you've gone out and got yourself an accounting degree or a medicine, whatever your degree might be, why I think it's 2.8 at the moment. Your HECS debt keeps indexing as like your punishment for not working. And it's like,
but no fault of your own, because you cannot access childcare.
correct.
Because even if you're working from home, which I've done my entire life and done a variety of different things, I would have given my left leg to be able to access the childcare subsidy or any sort of meaningful support at all to employ an au pair or a governess or, a childcare assistant, all those sorts of things, so I could do my work. We've seen it a lot. COVID, we saw a lot of kids popping in and out of Zoom meetings and all those sorts of things. If you're doing, certain types of work, you don't need or want or not appropriate for your child to be in the room whilst you're having conversations. If you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist doing a telehealth consult, having a 2-year-old sitting next to you is not really appropriate for anybody involved in that situation.
And we have stories of that. I did my own independent survey, and that's certainly one of the stories I got is a health professional that has little Jimmy sitting out stage left while she's offering some telehealth. Like, what is the quality of her service?
Yeah.
Like with distraction and so forth. But also, it's just bananas that we're living like in 2026. And then I think where I also feel really passionate is I know a lot of regions are no different to my own. And again, I think it's certainly Australia-wide where volunteering and contributing to that community is a really big piece of the social fabric. We run our football clubs, we run our, all the raffle drives and whatever. We are by and large community-minded people, and that's how we get a lot done. So I suppose I'm also more interested in putting a bit of a delineating factor behind this whole work thing. Like, childcare gets so tightly linked to work. But as far as I'm concerned, it's contribution. So if you're volunteering in the community, I don't care if you're doing Meals on Wheels or if you're working your job, because quite frankly, we need Meals on Wheels too. And if you need childcare to be able to contribute in that way, and that's how you wish to contribute to society, I don't think it's anyone else's role to judge it. But the reality that people need to know is that your audience knows this, is we need to talk louder about volunteering is still contributing. Like, it's still
it is
worthy.
Our communities, especially rural, regional, and remote, we run on volunteers because you could not pay a commercial rate for the work that we all do because nothing would get done. And as regulations around all these types of things increase and become more complex, that regulatory burden is placed on community groups and volunteers. So back in the day, I remember when I was a little kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandma. Grandma did Meals on Wheels, even though she was an elderly person herself. I was going on Meals on Wheels runs as a 3 and 4-year-old. But now you're not allowed to do that sort of thing. And it was a small country town and all that sort of stuff. But all these things are barriers and handbrakes and so if you want people to volunteer and contribute, you need to support them in doing that. And was at the drought forum last year that they had in Gawler, and I said to the federal government representatives there, I said, it's really very, very simple about how you look at policy. The government needs to decide, does it want a thriving, stable, regional Australian economy where people can live and work and participate, or do you want everyone to move to the East Coast? That is the choice that you need to make, and then build policies around it. You either have to support us to live here and do these things, or we'll have to pack up and move to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, those sorts of places. That's the choice that they need to fundamentally make as a government. And they keep tinkering around the edges and saying, oh, look, we're so generous, we fixed it. But they haven't, because they don't understand the problem.
No, and I think, it goes back to what's my one ask out of all this childcare stuff. My ask is that you bring regional and remote people to the table, because the reality is, I will say till I'm blue in the face, the lived experience will always be the truest form of insight. Now, whether that's a disability acts or mental health or anything, until you have walked in the shoes of those people, it's not your role to speak about it. But I think what it's playing out and what it's feeling like down the street, and my message to Canberra is that what the general people down the street are now feeling like is they're feeling absolutely retired to the fact of just, it's hard out here. Would I tell my children to come back? Probably not. The opportunities are better in the city. A friend of mine's a local retail owner, and she just looked at me the other day and she said, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And this is not somebody that is doing anything wrong. She's got kids. Her and her husband both have great jobs. She has her own business. She's tried to grow her business in the last year. She's taken on an employee. And she just looked at me and said, it hasn't moved my bottom line though. So that's where I think it's like, if there's all this collection of tax talk, and look, I'm not somebody that's qualified to talk about how government should or should not collect tax, and you can get someone else for that. But it talks to more of the application of those taxes, because I think at the moment what we're feeling like, and certainly what it's feeling like on the streets of regular country towns like mine, is that you're taking, but what are we seeing?
Yeah. And I think that is where people get really upset. And you see, because we're seeing at the moment a big shift to parties, alternative parties like One Nation. They're really gaining in popularity because the major two have done very little, either of them, to shift the needle on those sorts of things. Like regional Australia is the powerhouse of the Australian economy. Everything that is produced in regional Australia. We are keeping everybody fed, watered, clothed, in houses, with building materials, all the export wealth through mining, all those things, all generated in the regions. And we're getting really, really sick of not even getting the bare minimum of services in return for that. And that's why I think we're seeing this sort of broader political shift.
Yeah, certainly. And look, Jill, you're so much more entitled to talk about this to me, because at the end of the day, I am from, a more populated part of town. But we're also not asking for the world. Like, we are well aware of what's reasonable to ask for. I'm not asking for an Olympic swimming pool. I'm not asking, like, I had a premature baby. I'm not asking for a NICU. I'm not asking for tomorrow. I'm not doing a day trip for a specialist for my son. Like, they're specialists. I don't think it's reasonable that we have here, but there just needs to be an understanding. I just don't think childcare is one of those things. You talk about kids in 0 to 5. I think you're also just talking about like a population where, we should all be. Only today, I've had equality shoved in my face. Well, equality means all people, all.
Yeah.
Not just the chosen few, but all people.
And I think that's because we see the same with health and education. We're not asking for something that's completely unreasonable. We're just asking for the same level, the same standards that our urban counterparts enjoy. And I think that's literally the government's job to do that. That's what they need to do.
Correct. And I'll also hit the nail on, I think you hit the nail on the head with government, in that this is successive governments. And again, we spoke about this with Carl, in that I've been given a handover document for my local town that's from 2010. Now, there are emails in there that I could send today. No worries. We don't even have to fact check them, because we're talking about workforce participation. We're talking about equal rights for women. We're talking about all these things. We haven't moved the needle, and that is not one government's fault. That is multiple governments' fault. And I think my opinion is it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And I think, Carl said it was rough, but it was like, regional women don't matter. You don't matter.
They don't. We don't. And it's like regions don't matter and regional women matter less than anybody else, because our sole purpose in life, according to many, many people, is to just have babies and work at home. Yeah. So our contributions have always been invisible, unacknowledged. Give people their credit where credit's due. That is changing. A lot of people still don't like it. Even within our own agricultural community, we get a bit of pushback occasionally. But we're smart, we're motivated. A lot of us are tertiary educated. We want to live in the regions, have families, and still contribute, whether that's via volunteering or offering professional services or being a farmer ourselves. It's just Yeah, we've always been sort of hidden away, and it's sort of too hard basket. We see it, childcare, health, education, all those like the key services. Women matter least of all, it seems. And then because there's no way around it, we are the primary caregivers. And so by extension and default, children don't matter at all either. And they're being left behind.
Yeah, and I think, it's even interesting. Only recently, I went to Adelaide and did a course on AI, and I sat in the room and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. And it was half a day and I was around all these people. First of all, the gap between AI education in regional and metropolitan is outrageous. Like, get your skates on, people. We need to catch up. But I think what really stuck with me is whilst it was funded by the state government, and it was a fabulous initiative. Everybody else was home in half an hour. I day tripped that day. So it cost me a day trip, 5 hours travel. I got home at 8 o'clock. So it was a missed bedtime. It was an early night in for my husband. Like, the overall cost to our family for me to go and do that AI training was much bigger. Now, I actually said in the rooms, wouldn't it be great to have in the regions? But I do understand you couldn't get 40 people in the room. Like, you can't. So on one hand, you look at those things and it's like, oh, but I'm all for also traveling to those things because it broadens your horizons. It puts you into, bigger circles, and that they're all good things for you. But how are we going to close the gap? And I think I do talk a lot about, and I know a lot of people talk about that broadening gap, but that we see between the metro and the regions, and it's only getting bigger. And certainly, there is perceptions around farmers, and we're all stupid, and perhaps a farmer doesn't look like me or you. I don't know, but hey, that's cool. But without childcare, how are we meant to do things like AI training or all these things? And then at the same, take out the personal sacrifice to go and attend it. Like, it's just got to come at some sort of cost. And I think that's where those are the type of conversations. This is all just stuff rattling around in my head, but they're the types of conversations, if government were to raise some sort of round table, that we could have these conversations. And there's probably 20 other me's around. Like, there's going to be heaps of better ideas than my own. I'm not expecting to be the full stop to this, but until we're enabling the conversation, as far as I'm concerned, no one's serious about it until it's a conversation.
And this is a frustrating thing, because I know the South Australian government, every government, national, like federal, state, have all done productivity commissions and done all these reports and all those sort of things, identified in those very reports that the government has paid for and draw policy from, has identified access to childcare as a key part of boosting the productivity of our economy. And yet it's like, oh yeah, but not for those regional people. Don't worry about them fellas. We'll just build a couple of extra childcare centres in town. Like, it's so frustrating that the solutions exist. Work with the communities to give them fit for purpose, because not every community looks the same. Not every family's needs are the same. Give it a flexibility into the system, and we can fix it. It's not that hard. Just need the will to do it.
Yeah, and I think if I can lean on this audience for anything, it is certainly that obviously that we're going to have a skew towards the regions and agriculture, and there's probably more people that feel like me on this podcast than even Carl's. But certainly it is our time to make some noise, and I would really incentivize people just before is a lot of advocacy happening, and there's a lot of solution-based advocacy. And whilst I'm not discounting that some of those things would be solutions that would work in the regions, I really do believe the point of this is that regional and remote gets its own. We need a holistic point of view. And I think also the reason I don't want to get caught in the metropolitan noise is even between you and me, there's different solutions. Like, it's not going to work. And then if you go and ask someone, in outback Queensland, what they need won't be the same either.
Yeah.
So I think if we could pull together a round table that, is better at a mass population of regional remote voices and what we all need, that's certainly something. I mean, Carl did, as I said, he certainly has a motivation, I think, a genuine interest in regional remote. So he's still a media wagon. The more likes and views that YouTube gets, it's only going to encourage, I think, other media and the wheelhouse to pick it up. That's not a bad thing, because the media
it is on an issue and explaining an issue that you might not have a lot of understanding of, but may have a lot of empathy for. So we will drop the link to that podcast and the YouTube video in our show notes, listeners, if you wanted to catch up with that. And I think what we also need to do, Sarah, so have you got any like an online platform or a petition or a place where ladies, like women, families can submit their own stories? Can we give them too?
I can give you the link to my Instagram. So certainly I am passionate about working with government. I want to be outcomes focused and I want to work with them to really represent regional women. And that, again, must stress that's not just saying it's just me, but certainly if we can install anything, it is to get regional voices at the table. So I have got a link where I have been supplied some regional stories, and they're certainly very powerful because it's the truth. And again, it's the lived experience. And I've got stories from down here in the Limestone Coast where we've got essential workers that aren't working. We've got teachers and nurses that are letting their registrations lapse because they haven't been able to keep up the required hours. We've got preschool educators saying that they might have to leave. We've got farmers saying that they aren't able to go to work. And this is all people. Members of our migrant community really luck out. I was speaking to a group of them from a nearby district, and they were explaining to me that when they look at a secondary income, they only need their wife to work for a peak period. So maybe it's picking or a harvest or whatever it might be in your region. So let's say for argument's sake, it's 8 weeks, but they're unable to get care for an 8-week period to enable that to income just for that short spike. So they see it as an affordability problem because in order to be able to get a spot, they need to book in for the full year, but they don't need the full year. Yep. And they're able to budget and to make their world turn, but getting that 8-week spike of double income is their annual injection. So again, I think there's a lot of solutions. Like another one I've got is there's so much unused community infrastructure like community halls and so forth. Like we had an idea where we could have a mobile centre sort of follow our region, our broader region's peaks. And, it might be here for harvest and there for picking and whatever. And it would turn into a 52-week year or a 50-week year for those labour units.
And that makes a lot of sense. Like, especially when you're talking about horticulture, like picking seasons, you up in a regional centre for the, I don't know how long I don't know nothing about growing anything except cows, but it's, set up in the regional hall, do childcare for a period of time and then move to the next location when the next harvest is coming off. And this is the thing, regional solutions. So I think it was Kathy McGowan said it's something nothing about us without us. So, and I think that's the key point, because, I have seen all the other advocacy that's going on with regards to flexibility in childcare and all that sort of stuff. And it does, and again, there are overlaps and there are commonalities and they're all the other these sorts of things, but they have the benefit, these other sort of organisations, as they live in mainly urban areas. So they're right there on people's doorsteps. They have, they're just a lot closer. We've got the tyranny of distance. We've got to organise a larger cohort of people to get in amongst stuff to get these key policy points across. So we've got barriers to even advocating for better services, not just for accessing better services. So I think you're doing a really good thing, Sarah, I think, because it's a long time overdue that we've sort of had this sort of collaborative approach. And I'm really, really pleased to have you co-host the podcast with me today and talk about this. So is there anything you'd like to finish on, what people who are listening to this, because we do have urban listeners and we have regional listeners, of course. So what can they do specifically that's going to help us get better outcomes for regional, rural and remote families?
I think 2 things. I think engage with the media. I think at the end of the day, if you see any links or whatever that has to do with regional remote childcare, whether or not it affects you or someone share it, like it. Media responds to engagement. So the more that we can get the engagement, we need the critical mass and the help to build up. And I think the other one is I really would encourage any other parents in my situation to use your local member. Childcare is federal, education is state. But use your local member and write to them and tell them what's going on, because I don't think even they know half the time. And I would say don't assume that they do know. But if you're having a really difficult situation that's specific to your regional community, don't discount it. Don't put up with it. As I started with, the standard you walk by is the standard that you accept. Yeah, and I think together we can make some noise.
I think that's a really good point about utilising your local member, because how a lot of political and government advocacy works is the minister in charge of a portfolio will ring up, like if you've written a letter to the education minister, and they will ring up their counterpart, their local member counterpart, and say, oh, is this an issue in your community? And they'll go, I haven't heard anything about it, can't help you. And they'll go, oh, no, they'll just discount your direct submission. So if you're going to write to whoever you like to, but make sure you're CCing, copying in your local member, the opposition. If you're sending it to one person, send it to, as many relevant people as well, so everyone's receiving the same information at the same time. It's a lot harder for people to ignore it if you do it like that.
Well, exactly. And, as I said, just stay on it. But I mean, it's also probably my notice to government is start listening to us and start seeing us. I think it's completely unacceptable that there's handover documents from 2010. I think it's completely unacceptable that I'm friends with someone that's started advocating for childcare. Their child's about to start high school.
Yes.
That's completely unacceptable. It's Australia in 2026. Just get with the program.
Yeah, I first got involved in remote and regional childcare when I was the chair of an organisation called RICE, Remote and Isolated Children's Exercise. And that would have been, my eldest child's now in his 20s. So there's about 2006, 2007. And nothing has changed. Absolutely zero things have changed. My youngest child is about to start high school. So in all those years, in 20 odd years, not a single thing has changed for rural, regional and remote people. It's pretty shameful, actually, that there's been such a lack of action when it is such an easy and relatively affordable fix.
And absolutely. And I do think that the opportunity for both federal and state current governments is that I think we have put up with it and we've made do and we've plugged holes. But I just, when I walk down the main street and really look on the grass on like the absolute levels, or when I'm trying to recruit staff for the farm and stuff, there's just not much fat left in the system. The system is nearly out and regions were getting pumped. There's lots of state development. There's lots of compliance. One thing I'm forever fighting with my old man about is he's like, how do you do the books for 3 days? And I'm like, because I don't do the books. I literally am like a weird compliance manager now. In all honesty, I probably don't spend enough time on book work for what I should. So I think that that's the thing. We have moved into this new system and more we see on family farms that there is this role that I have that, somebody needs to be across or health and safety or PIC tests with either, your PIC thing was done today or ChemCert or whatever.
Yep.
We're doing our best to comply, but that comes at a cost too. There needs to just give us a break.
Yeah. Give us the support we need to do our jobs. It's pretty simple. We will be productive. Not much will slow us down if we have access to the right services that are affordable and meet our needs. And that's a message that I guess goes back into urban centres as well, because there are a lot of families who juggling different types of careers, like shift workers, paramedics, nurses, police. Structural childcare, like you go to the centre, etc., is super hard to manage for those sorts of people. So a childcare centre doesn't meet their needs either. No. So let's all get together and solve this problem. I think it's pretty easy to solve. There's only just one barrier, and that's the government. They're getting in the way of us fixing this.
Well, they're just not even talking about it. They're not even in the way. You'd have to know about it to be in the way, Jill.
Yeah.
But it's honestly,
you'd have to give a shit.
I just hope that if nothing else happens, you get the 88-day visa on immigration. That's it. We all know that's an on-off light switch.
Yep.
That'll at least just send a memo that they're listening.
And I do know back in the day when they changed the rules around having to actually pay 88-day visa holders. So you couldn't get them as volunteers anymore, which I understand why, because there were a lot of cases of people being taken advantage of. But there was also a lot of cases where those people it was a mutually beneficial relationship. They were, experiencing a lifestyle, learning new skills that then they could go on and get paid for. they weren't an impost on our business, a handbrake on our productivity. But if you have to, and this applies to any business, if you have to pay a complete novice, especially in quite a risky industry like agriculture, where, you know, people need a lot of supervision, a lot of training and education to operate safely, then you don't do it. And we argued very, very strongly to have childcare or au pair or whatever you wanted to call it in that 88-day visa allowance. And it was a straight up no, absolutely not. And there was to me, no reasonable rationale given for that. So if we could solve that's a stroke of a pen that could solve that. That would free up a lot of people with expertise, with, you know, skills, capacity to volunteer and provide essential services and work in their own businesses. So easy.
And I think that's the thing where, you know, you have the unique perspective of my professional background is, you know, in Sydney or London, if you worked after 8, you got a meal that you could claim to the business, were provided transport home if you'd caught public transport, all of those things. Well, all of a sudden, I'm trying to now install those as best practice for business management in our own farming enterprise. Now, if our boys are out working big, long days, be it harvest or whatever, I'm just dropping them out tea. No, I don't have an alternative. Like, it needs to come out of me because I'm not going to call them Uber Eats. I'm not going, like, it just, so I think that's the thing, is there just needs to be an understanding that we are doing really odd stuff, like sort of that definition of the farm employee. As I said, I am on the farm 3 days a week with a 7 and 4-year-old, but that's what the au pair has enabled us to do. It's enabled me to leave after lights out and drop teas. It's enabled me to do a gate change if my husband's not home. It's enabled me to do a water run if they're all busy. Could I do it with the kids? Sure, probably.
Should you though? Because should we take out, and this is, I especially in the more remote areas, like I've seen some very outrageous setups where people have built and installed to keep their children safe because they have no other options. And like, when you look at that purely from a child safety perspective, like the kids are technically safe, but if you said to someone in the city, in order for you to do your job, you have to put your child in a literal cage, can you imagine the outrage?
Yeah, like, that's it. Or like, you know, then Safe Work love to tell us, oh, farms are dangerous places for kids. So what's the option, Chief?
We know they're dangerous, but we don't have any other options. So we do end up putting our children in porta cots with bars on top to stop them climbing out, or, you know, fencing them in the cab of the car so they can't climb out the windows whilst you're out fixing a pump. Like, it's all like people go, well, I grew up like that and it didn't hurt me and blah, blah, blah. But then you live with that constant anxiety. Like, so we've got some wells here. The amount of time that I was constantly anxious that my child would inadvertently fall down a well. And this is not saying that they're just open holes out on the ground. They were fenced off. They were secure. They had things over the top. But like, you live with that anxiety, like, I'm taking my child to a very, very risky place. I've mitigated every single risk that I can, but what if? Because a child should technically not be in that environment in the first place. So,
And also, you know, you shouldn't be distracted because you probably got one eye on them and one eye on what you're doing. And I think that's the thing. And certainly the way we've organised our business is, that I haven't been a necessary wheel to the organisation because we can't afford it. Like, if we do need a primary parent to jump in and jump out and all of that stuff. So I just think it just needs a creative approach. Maybe there's some compliance that can be a little bit relaxed because I'm not putting, but, you know, some common sense applied to what's reasonable and practical out here. We're incredibly privileged. I mean, the staff that I have at our local centre are people I would call friends. They're people I have a glass of wine with at football. They're people, some of them came to my wedding. Like, quality is not a concern that we talk about a lot because they are our community people. You know,
embedded in your community. Their children are also accessing care at that same centre. It's
great. They're at the birthday parties. They're at all the things. And, you know, I was in a situation where I had a high-risk pregnancy and was out of town for 3 months for my second. They were all women that I knew were giving my kid a cuddle when I couldn't.
Yep.
Like, that is, you could never take away that. So I don't like when I feel questioned on the trust I have for the staff because literally I was on bed rest with women and children's. This was my only eyes and ears. So I really do understand when people talk about kid safety and all of those things. Yeah. They're all things that I feel like I've lived through. But certainly I just think if government just start engaging with us, and like I said, engage with a few of us, because what works for you is not going to work for me. And
so what you're saying, if we could get a commitment from state and federal government, do you think if we had a rural, regional and remote childcare roundtable with our state and federal counterparts there and relevant department heads, would that, in your opinion, go some way towards at least surfacing these issues with the relevant people? Because as you said, they may well not be aware because it's not in their best interest to be aware, and also open the door to start working together on solutions that are going to meet the needs of the people who actually need those services.
Yeah, Jill, I think that would be a really good start. And I think it would be a really good start for two reasons, because A, it would be a start, but B, I think there's a lot of communities that have invented their own new, beautiful little systems that work. And we could probably do some learning from one another because, hey, if it works well for the wheat belt, it might work for me. I don't to create something new. I'm happy to run off the existing.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel in any circumstance if it works.
Yeah, and why it probably does need to be federally started in that, like I said, I don't know what the wheat belt's up to, but if it works for them, it's cool. So look, I would love that to certainly be something that comes out of all of this. And as I said, even for the urban listeners, is just, we're not asking for anything remotely special or dissimilar. It's just things that fit our purpose. That's what we're asking for.
All right. Okay. I think that's a good spot to end, Sarah. Thank you so much for being my co-host today. I've really appreciated having you on, because this is the thing about South Australia. You live down the bottom and I live up the top, and we've never met in person yet. So, but I'm sure we will at some stage. And so I look forward to catching up with you in person. And I think you're doing great work. And again, we've already talked about it. Our community is run on volunteers. You're volunteering your time to advocate on the behalf of us all for a solution. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners do too. So thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Ag Fabs. We will put all the relevant links in the show notes. And bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Agsolutely Fabulous. If you've been listening along and enjoying all this content, which I assume you have, you've gotten this far, then you might also like Hatch's other podcast. It's the Ultimate Farm Wife Podcast. And I'm going to play the intro for you right now. Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife Podcast. Moving to the land and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. Thank you for listening to the Poldal Podcast. We've enjoyed having you here on the farm with us. For more information, please head over to poldalstudshorthorns.com. Over on the website, you will find anything from the YouTube video links, the bull lots, catalogue information and updates, and how you can best get the Poldal advantage. All our contact details are also over there. Another way of keeping in contact with us, apart from the podcast and the website, is following us over on the socials. We're most active on Facebook, but we also have an Instagram and YouTube page. That's all for tonight. Good night. Mind how you go. We appreciate you being here.